Chairmen of both the House Armed Services and Intelligence Committees are raising a red flag, urging the White House to respond to Moscow's breach of a nuclear weapons treaty. So while we're talking about the debate, this is something very real that's happening in Congress. My next guest warns that going to war is a distinct possibility if the world doesn't acknowledge the threat posed by Vladimir Putin. Retired General Richard Shirreff is the former Deputy Supreme Allied Commander for Europe. He's author of War with Russia, an urgent warning from senior military command. That's a novel, but it almost plays out a little bit like a war game, if you will. General, it's great to have you on the program.
Thank you.
The juxtaposition for someone like you must be really interesting, watching the debate happen between two potential presidents, but also hearing from our own lawmakers some real concerns about Russia, what Russia is doing. What are your observations just in general? What do you think the American public should know?
Well, I think we need to understand the real and present danger that potentially a resurgent Russia poses, the dynamic that was started with the invasion of Crimea in 2014, the ramp-up of military spending by Russia, the build-up of military forces, particularly the spotlight it throws on the Baltic states, which of course have significant Russian-speaking minorities, and the reality of the importance of building up our deterrent capability as a NATO alliance to protect and defend the alliance.
How bad is it, General, right now?
Well, I think, to be honest, the NATO alliance is a great alliance, the most successful alliance the world has seen, but there are plenty of indications that the emperor's clothes are pretty skimpy when it comes to an effective deterrence posture. So the point of the book is to highlight the weaknesses and hopefully generate the sort of debate among people to understand what really needs to be done.
What does need to be done?
Well, we need to see an effective, credible military capability, I think, forward-based in the Baltic states. We need to see effective NATO reserves that can reinforce them, an effective concept of defense worked through, practiced, deployed. We need to see an increase in defense spending among European nations particularly. But underpinning everything is the paramount importance of American lead of NATO and that absolute certainty that if any NATO member is attacked, that America will honor the key foundation of NATO, Article 5, that an attack on one is an attack on all.
I want to play a little sound from last night's debate as we digest what both candidates have said about Russia. Chris Wallace asked a question about a no-fly zone in Syria and what would happen if Russia was violating that no-fly zone. Would the United States shoot down a Russian plane? Here's what Hillary Clinton had to say.
I think a no-fly zone could save lives and could hasten the end of the conflict. I am well aware of the really legitimate concerns that you have expressed from both the President and the General. This would not be done just on the first day. This would take a lot of negotiation.
Just want to take in what she said also while playing out some of the video we have of Hillary Clinton handing the Russians the Russian reset button that we've talked so much about over the years. What do you think is at stake? And what about, for example, a no-fly zone if Russia violates it? How close are we to a confrontation that could end result in war?
Well, there's no doubt that one way of protecting civilians and controlling the continued fighting in Aleppo would be to establish a no-fly zone. But we need to understand fully the implications of this and go in eyes wide open. This is a major operation of war. The Syrian air defense system is highly sophisticated. Of course, it's Russian. And any form of shoot-down of Syrian or Russian aircraft could be a major spark. So I think we need to really understand the potential consequences. And part of that is understanding that the Russians would look at this in a holistic strategic picture. Then, for them, there's no separation from what's going on in Europe, what's going on in the Middle East, and indeed perhaps what's going on in Asia. So it highlights the importance of strong, effective deterrence to minimize the risk of any form of spillover elsewhere.
And so that's fundamentally the argument from Donald Trump, is that the West has been weakened by actions by somebody like Hillary Clinton, that it's very difficult to come back from the point that we are at with Russia. Are we at the point, General, where America is at a point of no return in showing that we still are leaders and that we will still confront Russia?
No, I don't think the West has been weakened by American weakness. I would say America remains a bastion of strength in the West. I think I would put the spotlight on Europe, frankly. And successive American secretaries of state have rightly criticized European nations for failing to step up to the mark in defense spending. No, we need to be focused on NATO. We need to, under American leadership, and we can do this. This is not, this is not impossible to achieve. It just requires the political will to build on the strength of the NATO alliance, which, of course, has survived the test of time and gives all the 28 nations who are members of it a degree of political and military strength that they'd otherwise not get if they were operating alone.
One of the news items, again, that's sort of getting buried today is it looks like the White House is going to use a commission that hasn't been used in 16 years to double-check whether or not Russia is following through with some of the treaties that we have when it comes to arms control. So again, all of this is playing out in the background while the spotlight is on the U.S. elections. And General, because our viewers often might see some very scary headlines about Russia, I would just like to go back to your experience yet again. And what keeps you up at night, and what we can do better as a nation to make sure that we don't have a confrontation with Russia?
Well, what concerns me is, number one, I think the lack of ambition and the lack of recognition of the dangers that we face across the Western alliance as a whole, the NATO alliance. I think there would be a real concern if there was any hint of America not being prepared to underpin the NATO alliance, to lead the NATO alliance, and to implement Article 5.
General Shirreff,
collective defense.
It's nice having you on the program. We look forward to having you back. Appreciate your experience and your service, of course. Thank you.
Thank you.